miner's daughter. Loretta Lynn and I are coal miners' daughters. You know, she's got all the money and I'd got all the education. But when I was growing up in Harlan County, Kentucky, back when the earth was cooling, education was the window to the world. And I remember when I was just 6 years old, I went to a program at the high school, and I sat on the stage with my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother. And I remember sitting on the stage. I can remember this as if it were yesterday. I was 6 years old. And I sat there swinging my little pudgy legs, you know, looking out at the congregation, wondering what all this was about. And what they were doing, I later learned, was that they were honoring my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother for being people who really loved the community, people who wanted to give something back to the community. And my family name was Hogg, H-O-G-G. That Joel used to say, does that make you a piglet? And I don't think so, but you know, it was the idea that the Hoggs came from Northern Ireland and Scotland. You know, they had that fierce Scotch-Irish mindset, and they helped settle the valley. So I grew up from that first recollection. One of my first recollections is sitting on the stage with my mother and my grandmother and my great-grandmother, all talking about heritage, legacy. Can you imagine how dramatic that must be for a 6-year-old? And so I watched them tell their stories, and I became enamored with the stories of mountain people, the tenacity, the strength of Appalachians. And so from that then became a whole odyssey. I'm the first in my family to be a psychologist, but it's interesting that both of our sons are very much related to the world of psychology. I happen to be married to a great educator, Joel Siegel, and he's the intellectual in the family. And I'm the, what would you say, Joel? I'm sort of like the extrovert. I like to be with people. Joel considers it a great day when he's had no one to talk to except me, and he's reading his books. And so our two sons are both professors, so we're a family of educators. And I think it all became from that first day sitting on that little stage with my family, looking out, thinking in terms of community, thinking about teachers, thinking about making statements. I've always loved the idea of people telling their stories. So that's what I think education is about.
So where did you go from there?
Where did I go from there?
How did you get out of the mountains? How did you get off that little stage?
Well, I had a wonderful experience in high school, a little mountain town. And, you know, in mountain schools, where as I told you, my father was a coal miner. Being a coal miner's child in those days wasn't a bad thing. It was a mountain town. It was a coal mining town. And so education was the window to the world. So it was important for me as the firstborn in my family, and my sister, we were very close. Both of us are educators. And my mother and father wanted us to go to school. And they worked hard to make sure that we got a good education.
So where did you go to school? Where did you go to school?
I went to Cumberland, Kentucky, a coal mining town. It was close to Benham and Lynch. Benham was a coal mining town, different coal company. Lynch, just in 3 miles, you had two different towns, Cumberland, Benham, and Lynch. And so, again, going back, my father was a coal miner. His brother was killed in the mines. My grandmother had a third grade my daddy's mother had a third grade education and ran a boarding house, and she made money that way. My mother's grandmother, as I mentioned, settled the valley. So they were a very proud mountain family, and my father's family were poor but hardworking with no education. So I grew up side by side with two grandmothers living within you know, 3 or 4 miles of each other, quite different. My mother's family settled the valley. My father's family, poor, but making a living with the boarding house, bringing in coal miners in the boarding house. So I grew up in 2 different worlds, a proud old family and a proud grandmother who couldn't read or write on my father's side.
Joe mentioned your early experience with education.
Being brought up in a community that was settled by my family, as the oldest child, the first grandchild, I was expected to be, you know, kind of a model. My mother and father early wanted my sister and me to be students. I remember how important it felt to go to the first grade, to have my little legal pad, the little Blue Horse spelling tablet, you know, and have my little pencils in place, and to walk to school with my little lunch. So growing up in the mountains of Kentucky, I really became very excited by the mountain mystique. And I wanted to write a book later, Mountain Women, Vein of Iron, because the women were the ones who, you know, kept it going. My father was a coal miner, as I said, so he worked in the mines. They came back with heavy black soot around the eyes, and, you know, they had to wash off in the what is it called, a place where they had to come to the wash house, you know. So to me, I grew up with a proud family, but my father's family were poor and, you know, recent immigrants, but my family did settle the valley. What I'm making sense of is it's the mountain mystique. The one thing about mountain people, my grandmother would say when she meant to compliment somebody, they're decent people. So I learned with the idea of integrity, decency, giving something back to the community. You do the right thing. You know, you don't treat people indifferently. They may be coal miners, but they're people. They may be immigrants, but they're people. Respect that. Respect dignity of hard work. Those are wonderful values, by the way. I think they're values that last. They're enduring values. So growing up in that kind of settlement, when I could walk to school, and I'd have to walk by my grandmother's house, my great aunt's house, my cousins' houses, my teacher's house, the mayor's house, you know, walk by the street, and everybody said, put on your sweater. You're going to need your knee socks today. You know, everybody's looking out for everybody. What a wonderful way to be brought up, when the whole community looks after the young, encourages them, watches after them, and invites them. And my grandfather, who never had an education, he'd sit on the porch, and I'd walk by his swing and say, come set a spell. Come set a spell. Tell me about how school is. And my granddaddy, I used to love him, spit tobacco. Come tell me about yourself. Did you learn something today? I love that mountain expression, you know. Did you learn something? Yes, I did, Granddaddy. Paul Trent, Ma Trent, my mother's daddy, my father's daddy. My family were the Hoggs and the Creeches and the Lewises. So, you know, you have that sense of identity. We've lost some of that, haven't we? We don't have children walking to school today, walking by everybody in the community and say, put on your knee socks, you know, got your sweater. Well, Joe likes for me to tell a story that really changed my life. And I've told it a lot because I think that teachers made a difference. All of us are teachers. But sometimes there's a teacher in our life that changed our life. And the story that really, if I had a story to pass on, it would be the story of a teacher in the 4th grade. When I was a student in the 4th grade, I'd already sort of etched out a place in my heart that I wanted to be really smart. I wanted to be this smart girl, you know? And I wanted to make straight A's. I don't know where that came from. I guess it's from the family. But I wanted to be really smart and to act like I was smart and to show that I was smart. So I wanted to make always straight A's. That was going to be my gift to my family. And in the 4th grade, and this is a very real turning point in my life, I wanted to make a straight A so much that I decided to cheat one day. And I'd never cheated before. But I couldn't spell a word. And it became important for me to always make a straight A. And I decided that I was going to cheat so that I could make a straight A on another spelling test. And I remember that I took a little piece of paper like this, and I wrote the word that I couldn't spell on this little piece of paper and was going to use it in at the spelling test. The word that I couldn't spell was kitchen. That's prophetic, Joel says, because I cannot cook. I collect cookbooks. Joel said that one day, said in our family we read great meals. Well, that's the truth. I just don't know how to cook very well. But I decided that I was going to cheat, and I couldn't spell the word kitchen. So I wrote the word kitchen on a little piece of paper like this. And I was sitting on the seat next to the blackboard, and I thought I was going to be so stealthy. Wrote that little word kitchen. I was going to make another 100, you know. Betty Fay, smart little girl. And I wrote the word kitchen, K-I-T-C-H-E-N. And you know, when you're cheating, you want to be sort of secret. So I looked up to make sure that the teacher wasn't looking. And she was looking straight at me. And she walked by my desk and she said very quietly, I never will forget this, Betty Fay, I see you cheating. See me at recess. I just died. Caught cheating. All the children went out. I kept sitting at recess in that little mountain school. Miss Huff saw me sitting there. She walked by my desk. I said, Miss Huff, what are you going to do to me? You caught me cheating. And she said, honey, don't you know you're smart? I said, I'm not too smart, Miss Huff. I can't spell kitchen. And she said, Betty Fay, makes me cry. She said, Betty Fay, dry your eyes, honey. Come up here. And I went up to her and she said, don't you know you're smart? Honey, you're smart. You don't have to cheat. Now dry your eyes and go on back out to play recess. And I went back and I said, oh my goodness, how can I do this? I wish I could have lived to tell her that story. How she saved my life. She could have ruined me. She could have said to all the students, this is the child that's cheating. She didn't. She gave me dignity. And I resolved with a fierce resolve that, oh goodness, that I would never, ever treat people with disdain, you know, to unlock that potential. And I wish I could have told her that. Somewhere in heaven, she's probably watching me crying, said, Betty Fay, dry your eyes, go on back into the cloakroom. I'm not going to hurt you. Go out and play. It's okay. You did all right. But, you know, the influence of someone who tells you you can be what you're capable of becoming, what a wonderful lesson that is. You're a little 4th grader. I could have been ruined that day, you know? And I think I think that's why I became a teacher educator. I wanted to teach teachers of the profoundness of their influence, not just in what you know, how many books you're going to learn about, but it's who you are. She gave me a sense of who I was. You don't have to cheat. You know, you can be what you're capable of becoming. So those are wonderful lessons, I think, for us as leaders, for anybody. Because all of us are leaders, you know, in some way. So it became my mantra. You're capable of being what you're capable of becoming, you know, and that significant teachers, they can be mothers or fathers or grandparents or friends, whatever. But it paved the way for me to think in terms of what are the basics of leadership. I'm jumping, but to me it became how you lead is you lead with authenticity, you lead with integrity, you lead with spirit, not with how to, but why to treat people with dignity, to give them the confidence to be what they're capable of becoming. Yeah. Makes me cry still.
Don't worry, I guess I'm sympathetic.
Empathic, you know, and sympathetic too, because all of us have moments in which someone changed our lives and gave us a new sometimes they've ruined lives.
More so.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't that be sad to, in a moment, to have treated someone with the lack of civility or the lack of appreciation for their meager efforts to be what they're capable of becoming? Mm.
So once you started your formal education, what happened? Where you went off to the university?
I went away to a college in Kentucky. There's an interesting corollary there. I was president for 25 years, and I went away to a little college in Kentucky, University of the Cumberlands. It was called Cumberland College then. I grew up in Cumberland, Kentucky, but the University of the Cumberlands is 100 miles away. But it's interesting that my great uncle, again, was president for 25 years, and I was president for 25 years. Don't you think that's an interesting corollary? They don't make much of that, but I think it's an interesting one. Two presidents, both serving 25 years. One at a private college and one at a public college. But I went away to college, this little mountain college, you know. My father was a coal miner again. We had no money. I went on a little scholarship, went to Cumberland College, and then began my odyssey in education. Hmm? Oh, Cumberland College was a special place. As I said, first in my family to go to college. And I remember that it was important for me to be a good student. And I had a favorite professor, and his name was Professor Evans. And he was the one that I loved the most at Cumberland College. I went back to see him just before he died. I'd become president of the university by that time. I went back to see him, and he was lying in a hospital bed in his 90s, wasted away. I walked over to his bedside, and I said, "Professor Evans, I'm Betty Fay." He said, "Betty Fay." And he used to teach in an old-fashioned way by calling off a quote from a card in his hand, you know, and you'd have to answer with the rest of the quote. And I remember that when I went to see him, he said, "Betty Fay," and he called off a quote from a long ago lecture and waited for me to answer it, you know, like he used to. And he called off this quote, and I couldn't remember it. And he started crying. And he said, lying in that hospital bed, "Oh, Betty Fay, nobody ever remembers a thing I said." And I just died. Oh, I said, "Professor Evans, I really don't remember what you said. I'm so sorry. But I remember what you were." And he squeezed my hand, and he said, "Oh, that ought to be enough for any teacher." I love that. And I've thought about that so many times. That ought to be enough. That ought to be enough. And so from that, I told the professor, "I'm a teacher because of you." And I mean, isn't it wonderful to have role models that encourage you, unlock your potential? Makes me cry every time I think about it. And we went up to, Cumberland College, University of the Cumberlands, where I went, and took Joel down to the library, and there was a picture of Professor Evans. Then I said, "Oh, Joel, come look, here's a picture of Professor Evans." And Joe said, that's the Professor Evans. And so to me, the remarkable influence of a teacher who lets you be what you're capable of becoming. So my favorite stories have always been about my teachers. Miss Huff, Professor Evans, twins. They made a difference in my life. Wouldn't you hate to be a teacher and not to have made a difference in their life? Not just to have taught you the book, for goodness sakes. Taught you how to live, how you make choices, how you create a life for yourself, how you make a life of meaning. Those are the lessons that teachers ought to be teaching, not information. Someone said there's enough scientific information written every day that would fill 7 complete sets of Encyclopedia Britannica. Good Lord, I don't want one more bit of information. Teach with meaning. Teach by inviting others to see themselves as able and valuable. Isn't that the best lesson of all? Where'd you learn your lessons?
From all those who
Now, Joel tells a story of a teacher that I think she was a nun at a little boarding school where he went. And I think it's a wonderful story of how you were having trouble reading, I think, Joel. Or what was it, studying or what? And she said that he needed glasses. Maybe that would help. And she gave him some glasses, but they had fake glass in it, plain glass. And all of a sudden it opened up his whole world to reading. And he became a scholar. Don't you love it? The promise of a student. Honey, George, you need some good set of glasses. And all of a sudden he became a marvelous student. Seeing with fresh eyes. The power, the single power of a teacher in one moment changed his life. Teacher Miss Huff, who caught me cheating, changed my life. Goodness, no wonder I wanted to be a teacher. Everybody in their family's a teacher. But we're all teachers, aren't we? Just teaching in a different classroom, just what I said.
How did you carry that teaching into administration? I mean, there's...
I think administration is
it's a big
teaching.
difference.
I was a happy professor at the University of Florida, and happily won the Best Teaching Award at the University of Florida. And I had to give a talk. And I said, what in the world do I do giving a talk on, how to lead? I've never been anything but a teacher. But they wanted me to be the Dean of Academic Affairs. I had won the Best Teaching Award at the University of Florida, which was an honor. And I had to give a talk, and I talked about teachers who'd made a difference in my life. And you know how you're propelled into something by a simple moment? By giving that talk, I got a lot of attention. And so then when they wanted a new Dean of Academic Affairs, somebody said, get that woman, that gave that talk. So I became a dean at the University of Florida as a professor. I mean, I'd had no interest in administration. And I thought, well, isn't that sweet? They want me to come over and be a dean. What does the dean do? I didn't know what the dean did. But I really loved the idea of administration, because I thought it was teaching in a different classroom. And I don't know where you want me to go with that, but from being a professor, teaching joyfully about invitational leadership and ethical leadership, then becoming a dean, it started me on a whole new trajectory. And it's unusual to move from a classroom to a dean's job, without going into administration. I had no lessons on administration. Never had any dealings with administrators except to admire them. So to become from a professor to a dean, what does a dean do? Hey! And so then that odyssey I found out that I loved it. It was just teaching in a different classroom. And that you could use teaching, which is to invite others, enroll them in your vision. I became a student of administration. And not how to, but why to. And I became absorbed with great leaders who taught me about that. I took the Myers-Briggs type indicator, you know that. I love that. I worked with Mary McCauley at the University of Florida. And she was the author, the architect of the type indicator. So I knew that I'm an ENFP, a strong, extrovert, intuitive, feeling intuitive, you know, all that expressive. But in administration, I learned to appreciate all the different dimensions of leadership. And as a strong extrovert, I need an introvert around me. As a strong intuitive, I need a sensing person around me. So to me, ENFP, INTJs, I learned how important it was early, intuitively, but also learning from the great thinkers in those days that you must surround yourself with people who add to the dimensions. And as I said, I've learned very early on, if you have only expressives, you're going to just talk each other to death. And if you're only sensing people, you know, you're just going to pick up impressions. I learned, and I think it's an important lesson, to tolerate differences. To not only tolerate, which sounds a little bit self-serving, but to explore and to be exultant about differences. And I think it's a good trait of leadership, to surround yourself with people who are better than you are at what they do best. Any leader who thinks that they do it all and know it all, they're stupid.
Let me back up to the classroom before you were selected to be a dean. What was important to you at that time? Because obviously being jettisoned out of the classroom to administration may have been a psychological jolt. But what was it that kept you energized in the classroom?
In the classroom?
In the classroom, yeah.
But I think that administration can be teaching. You're just teaching in a different classroom.
But when you were in the classroom with regular, standard, traditional students, what was your motivation then, or if you look back at it now, what do you think was your contribution at that point? Before you went,
You mean when in administration?
before you went into administration?
Oh, I think a colleague and I use the term invitational education. And I like to think that teaching is not the acquiring of information. It has to see yourself as a learner, how you grow in connection with others. And so I was working with a colleague named William Perky. And we were both young students, teachers, but we were students together. And we wrote a book together on becoming an invitational leader. And it's becoming an invitational teacher, using the term inviting, which means to summon cordially, not to shun. And so we wrote a little book on invitational leadership, invitational teaching, good term, to invite, to summon cordially. And we based our book on the premise of trust, respect, optimism, and intentionality. And the book is Becoming an Invitational Leader. And so intentionality is important. Trust, respect, optimism, and intentionality. Trust is basic to leadership. And how you build relationships in which you come together and you have faith in each other. Trust, respect, you have untapped potential. I respect you. Optimism, that untapped potential with trust and respect, and intentionality. You put it together to make it happen. And so what we learned from our work with trust and respect and optimism, that term intentionality became a good term. So our book, Trust, Respect, Intentionality, and Respect, trust, respect, optimism, and intentionality. Intentionality is how you put it all together. So we use the metaphor of the people, place, programs, policies, and processes. If the people are in sync and they really believe of leading with integrity, if the place is inviting, if the people, the place, and the programs are those that are facilitated, people, place, programs, policies are inviting, and the processes then become facilitated, became a pretty good little way of looking at the head and the heart of leadership.
So where'd you go when you're the Dean of Academic Affairs? What sticks out in your mind as an important part of what you did in that position?
I became Dean of Academic Affairs, but it was for continuing education. And it was the first dean I was the first woman dean at the University of Florida of an academic unit, and gave me a lot of trajectory. But I was working with Mary McCauley of the Type Indicator, working with affective education. So it became easy for me to think in terms of how do you apply the principles of ethical leadership to the practice of leadership. So to me, this then became my motto.
She was entrepreneurial.
What?
The entrepreneurial spirit that you brought to it.
Well, the entrepreneurial spirit, I think that's a part of that. Entrepreneurship comes from optimism. You know, I think I can do it. Find a way to do that. To be entrepreneurial is to reach out, to be open to change, to not be so solid. I like the idea of being fluid, entrepreneurial, reaching out, finding new optimism is so much a part of that.
Seeing opportunity.
Seeing the opportunities, seizing the opportunities. I like the term seize. To embrace change, to welcome change. Change is a part of life, isn't it?
From there, where did you go?
From the University of Florida?
From that position, where did you go from there?
Actually, I was Dean of Academic Affairs for Continuing Education, which made it very open. All the overseas programs then became part of my domain, working with outside voices, but working in academic affairs with the Office of Academic Affairs gave me a certain amount of clout. Then I left there to become Dean of College of Education and Psychology at Western Carolina University, which gave me another opportunity. Instead of being so international, then I became focused on leadership and working with education, working with the helping professions. And that was a wonderful odyssey to have both the international thrust as a program and outreach, and then to think in terms of the concept of education and pedagogy and psychology. So I've been blessed by having two opportunities to be both focused on pedagogy, teaching, learning, and on the other on giving back, going into the community, going into the broader world. It's been a wonderful odyssey, as you can imagine, because it ties in what we're doing now with ethical leadership. I like to think that ethical leadership should be global, that we're not talking about what is place-bound, but should be basic to a better world. So the principles that I learned in the pedagogy of education then became a platform for me to think in terms of internationalization, global education, ethics, pluralism. These are all good terms, it seems to me, all based on trust, respect, optimism, and intentionality.
So from Western Carolina, where did you go?
I was Dean of Academic.
From there, where did you go?
Actually, interesting odyssey. Joel figures prominently in that. But went to the University of Florida. Excuse me.
when you came here?
Well, yes, here it came to Kennesaw. I remember I was sitting at, someone had told me that there was a job opening at Kennesaw and that my name had been put forward. And I thought, never heard of it. And one of my friends came in and said, there's a job opening at Kennesaw, and I said, never heard of it. And we came down here, interviewed, fell in love with it.
It's Kennesaw College.
Hmm?
It's Kennesaw College.
It was Kennesaw College, but oh my goodness. You know.
So somebody submitted your name for you? You
Yeah,
sort of...
yeah. And they said, you really ought to apply. I never heard of it. And then they called me and they said, would you come down and interview? And came down, and Joel and I drove into Marietta. I never will forget this. We stopped in the street and we got out of the car and walked down the street. And we walked into what was a store, Joel?
He was Johnny Walker's.
Yeah, Johnny Walker's. I said, what's it like here? And he said, oh, it's a great place to live. You know, and we walked down the street and we stopped and said, what's it like? And everyone we met just seemed so supportive. And I thought, maybe this is the place. And then, of course, the rest was history.
Did you talk about your 25 years at Kennesaw? A long time. What?
Yes.
How did you see the transformation from Kennesaw College to a thriving four-year university?
But you see, Kennesaw was a small, it started off as a 2-year college. But what excited me about it, it had everything going for it. I'd been doing studies of what made colleges important, and it was on an economic corridor. Right in the middle. It was a commuter campus that was hot then in those days. It had all the support of the community. Everybody loved the idea of this little 2-year college becoming a 4-year college. Its mission was right. It wanted to be of the people. So to me, I felt called here. I felt I was supposed to be here. Joel and I drove into Marietta, looked around, and good place. He said, what's it like here? Good place to live, good place to work. And the people were so inviting. I'd use that term over and over again, but when you reach a place and where people are wanting to move, be on the move, we early disclosed that we were a college on the move. I like that, on the move. I inherited this college. The first president was great. He built this college. He had a dream for it. I just took it to another level. Dr. Sturgis was a big man. I stood on the shoulders of a giant. But I think that's what leadership is all about. Passing it on. Building up what you can, passing it on to the next generation. So.
What were some of the significant challenges for you?
The what?
What were some of the significant challenges for you as the president, as we started to grow and more students wanted to come here?
Well, we were growing without money. That's one of the biggest problems that any growing university could be. We're a large system. And for us to grow without money was exceedingly hard. And we had to grow with the idea that we were not going to get the money that we needed, but that we had to provide the quality for it. So we became very tenacious in wanting to be a college of meaning. And I always wanted us to be more than a commuter campus. And so I love the concept of a college of meaning. Don't you? To make a difference in the lives of our students. And I think that's what we've done.
Any regrets?
Any regrets?
Any regrets?
Regrets? No, I don't think that way.
Okay.
I'm surrounded by wonderful, wonderful deans. As president, we all worked together so well. And we wanted the college to be a college of meaning. We wanted it to be a college of character. We didn't want it to be a drive-in college. There's a difference in getting an information, but we added, one of the best things I think we did something called symposium. And we brought in great speakers every year to announce a theme. One year we'd have the year of service, another year of, a new view of the future. And to have guest speakers come in from all over, to have people come in like Howard Gardner, people like that. We had symposium meetings in which we'd bring in Francis Hasselbein. I could just go down the list, and we'd study Stephen Covey. I think it's very important for you to have a philosophical base for leadership, not to talk about management so much, but to talk about leadership. Our symposiums were always well attended, often required. Students would be required to come and hear great speakers come. I think that was one of the best things that we did. And when you have speakers who can say the message better than the president can say it, and you can use outside voices. So our symposium then became a way for us to hear those outside voices and then to take ideas down. Yeah.
Looking forward, what's on your agenda of things to do?
Looking forward, a colleague and I are working very hard. We started, as I mentioned several times before, the Alliance for Invitational Education, and this is our little textbook that we use. And we have an international alliance now in 11 countries. And my colleague and I are continue to write on invitational leadership. We have this alliance. We continue to go to those meetings. Hong Kong is one of our biggest organizations. We have a great leader in Hong Kong, Peter Wong, who's the Commissioner of Higher Education there, education. And so we have programs, as I said, in 11 countries. But we have an annual meeting every year. This is my thrust. I want to follow that concept of ethical leadership, building on the basis of trust, respect, optimism, and intentionality, and to relate it to business. We've used it when a colleague and I have used it with the governor's commissions. We've done 30 commissions several years ago using this little book. And people say, this is becoming an invitational leader. It's not just for education. It's a way of looking at leadership in business, nonprofit, teaching. So it's an ethical theory of practice.
Leadership is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
South Africa.
We go to South Africa. We have a program in Stellenbosch, and they use this there as well. Use it in Hong Kong.
Of all the places that you go, is there a particular place that you just can't wait to go back again?
South Africa.
South Africa. Why is that?
South Africa is the developing nation now. Of course, they've gone through so many trials, but we've been working at University of Stellenbosch, and it's been. I think Joel and I can safely say it's been one of the highlights of our life, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but
And when we went to Stellenbosch, the place itself is old academic university. But they have its first, they use the term blacks there differently than we do, but they have the first black rector, the first black president. And I had the pleasure of walking in his inauguration ceremony. And I have a sort of not an endowed, but a distinguished chair kind of arrangement there. But Joel and I feel most warmed, I think, by being in South Africa. We walk down the streets.
Friendly people.
Friendly. It's congenial people. They're eager to get beyond apartheid. They're really interested in reconciliation and to be a part of a country coming into its own, led by great ethical leaders now. making a difference. I feel that's my calling. I want to go there. And then we have an institute, as I said, named for us in Hong Kong, working with the Commissioner of Education there, using the word of ethical leadership. So ethical leadership is the coin of the realm today, you know? We want leaders of ethics. We want students of ethics. We want teachers of ethics. We want business people of ethics. And so to me, ethical leadership is the coin of the realm.
Is this time after leaving Kennesaw as the president, is this time the time that you've been training for? Has all of this been in preparation for what you're doing now?
Well, I like to think that all of life is a progression, you know, and that each stage is the stage that you're going through. I believe in stage theory, don't you?
I do.
And I love the concept of integrity being the last stage, you know, in which it all comes together. Inner grit or integrity and fullness, meaning. So I think integrity.
Generativity.
But I think you want people of character and integrity and meaning. My personal role model is Frances Hesselbein of the Drucker Foundation. I love her work. She's, I think, in her 90s, has the spirit of about a 50-year-old, but I like her concepts of integrity. I like to be around people of integrity. I like to see what it is, inner grit that calls people to life of service. I like the concept of giving back. So leading with integrity, leading with purpose, leading with soul, these are all very important to me. It's the attitudes, the beliefs and values that are important to the leader, not the how-to. I keep coming back to that, but that's a very important strain. We have too many books on how-to. We need more books on why-to. So when we put this big Remembrance Rock on our campus, that I like to refer to often, Carl Sandburg, you know, ask, who am I, where do I come from, where am I going? I keep continuing to ask questions. Who am I, where do I come from, where am I going? What's the meaning? How do I matter? What's my legacy? You know, to what do I testify? These are all questions that we should be asking of leadership, not how to, why to? How do we become more invitational, more facilitative, more inviting? All those questions. Too many books on how to.
That's why I don't want to point my finger at anybody and say, this is how you do it.
But to do it with integrity, to do it with sense of purpose, to do it with meaning. What a wonderful time it is to be an educator. We have the ability now, I think, with all the tools of information. My favorite article in the world was written by John Clendenin from Bell South, What the Computer Cannot Do for You. Of all the papers that I've read, I like his work the best. What the computer cannot do for you. And one of the things that I'm so bored with is how people are so compelled by the computer. And then again, I come back to the same thing I said. If loneliness is public health problem number one, the computer's not going to do it. Am I right? It's personal relationships.
Exactly.
What can't the computer do for you? What can't the computer do for you?
Yeah, what can the computer do for you?
What can't it do?
What can't it do? It can't give you friendship, can't give you lonely. I mean, it can't fill the potholes of the soul.
Potholes of the soul, I like that one.
I think personal relationships. I keep coming back to the same point. If loneliness is public health problem number one, it's our fault. Joel and I have just become enamored with the idea that we should be training young people today. And if I had my druthers and I were doing a senior experience program, I would send our young seniors in our universities into nursing homes. I'd make them work with those people in nursing homes, get storytelling from them, talk to them about what their lives were like. Wouldn't that be a fabulous project the stories of the elderly, wintering into wisdom, telling what they knew. And maybe I'm going to do that someday, but I think that'd be a wonderful exercise for the senior experience, that they do something back, get those stories in action, and go into nursing homes, go into hospitals, be in the helping professions. That's an idealistic way of looking at it, but it could be done.
What else is that she needs to tell people about?
Well, I think a very compelling story is what happened at this university after 9/11.
That's right, you mentioned that earlier, the 9/11 experience.
Parker Palmer came.
Right after 9/11, which is a day of great infamy, we had a speaker on our campus, Parker Palmer, great writer and great educator. And he told the story of a man emerging from the first tower after the plane hit the first tower. And the man walked out of that first tower covered with debris, face cut by flying glass. And a police officer came over to him and said, "Sir, may I help you? You're in shock." And the man said, "I'm not in shock. I'm fully cognizant for the first time in my life about what's important." When he told that story, that's the story that we want to be fully cognizant of what am I fully cognizant. So that's when we put the Remembrance Rock on their campus. And on the Remembrance Rock, after Parker Palmer came, who am I, where do I come from, where am I going? The questions of the rock. And then we started adding new questions. Who am I, where do I come from, where am I going, what's the meaning, how do I matter, to what do I testify, of what am I fully cognizant? These are all important questions for leaders. So that everything fits, you know, how you get to where you want to go, how you move beyond how to why to. How do you develop lives of meaning? How do you use self-actualization to be what you're capable of becoming? How do you enroll others in those visions? Those are not trite terms. Those are important terms on leadership. And again, not how to, but why to.
Can I take you way back to the beginning? Can I take you way back to the beginning? One last question. You talked about your great-grandmother, your grandmother, your mother being recognized by the community for their community activity. What did they do? What was it that
I'm sorry.
What was it the women in your family did that caused the community to recognize them back when you were 6 years old? Do you remember what it was that they were recognized for as part of the community?
Well, one of the things about it is part of my heritage with those women, strong men too, but the women, Appalachian Women, Vein of Iron, the book that I want to write, the tenacity of the women in the mountains is legendary. They had to raise the children, you know, they worked in the fields. So I grew up with strong women leaders, women's ways of leading. Not only were they righteous, they all went to church, you know, they had a sense of identity, but they also had to raise the children and do those things that were very important, at the same time running business. So I grew up with strong role models. So,
was there something that they did that was more community oriented?
Of course.
Sure. What were the kinds of things that they did, rather than just the traditional, you know, strong?
Well, they could run the farm, but I was always taught that the women were not just keepers of education and faith, supposed to give back to the community. And I love the epitaphs of the women in my family as well as the men. But the women, Mountain Women, Vein of Iron, that's the book that I said I want to write. But they were tenacious. They had
one of them was in politics.
My grandmother.
to fly the train there.
Yeah. My great-grandmother, stern woman. Stern. Strong. Joel laughs at the story, but she always was going to lobby in the legislature. This is a woman in Harlan County, Kentucky, most remote county, and she'd get on the train. She'd flag the train down with her apron, and they'd stop for her. And she'd get in the caboose and she'd ride to Frankfurt, and she'd just preach to those legislators, you need to come down to Harlan County and help us out. I loved her. She was the most stern great-grandmother you've ever seen. But I love that. That was my role model. My grandmother, Rosa C. Hogg, great woman.
Church.
And then my mother, all these strong women influences. But it was wonderful to see women very early. I mean, that's 1,000 years ago. But to see them, women's ways of leading then became very strong for me.
Have you seen the impact of women changing over your lifetime? 1,000 years ago, and I'll let you make that comment. But it seems like women have always been leaders and framers of thought.
I think they have.
And so the question is, other than the openness of and acceptability of women as the physical leader, what have you seen the difference, or have you seen differences over the years?
I think one of the things that I early learned was I had the pleasure and the opportunity to be the first woman in a number of things. And I found that it's not just women's ways of leading, it's an affective way of leading. It's a transformational way of leading. Men and women are both comfortable with this. Stephen Covey, others, great proponents. It's not a masculine or feminine thing, but it's a way of leading in which you invite others, which is much more facilitative. And I think that once I learned that it's not a how-to, not one more tip, but how you use yourself as an instrument. And the authenticity must come from being a person of character, being a person of integrity, inner grit. These are not old-fashioned terms, these are good terms. We seem to have lost something about a feeling for integrity. When we have the excesses of vanity, the excesses of greed, the excesses of self-aggrandizement, we should be puzzled in a democracy. A democracy has to be one in which you believe in the importance of the others, the self and others. Humanistic, people think that term's too light. I don't think it's light at all. I think it's very important to be human. So to me, I'm obsessed with the idea that we should be training leaders of integrity, inner grit, trusting, respectful, optimistic. These are all good terms. Not how to, but why to. I keep coming back to the same litany, but it's an important litany. We seem obsessed with how to, not why to. We need to be asking questions of ourselves, a sense of consciousness. Our whole country needs to be leading to that, it seems to me. We're so self-aggrandizing. These are terms that come lightly to me because I've thought about them so much. But until we get to the place where we're enrolling others in the vision of shared ownership, giving something back, doing something for the disinvited, the disenfranchised, that's what democracy is about. We're caught up in how to, not why to. I keep repeating myself, but it's important.
That's good enough. That's good enough. You want to take her on another story?
I love the quote
I
from...
like the story of in 1970 when she became the first dean. It was pioneering in a way. And you can ask her what happened when she was in the line with the other deans. Well, the faculty were coming through.
Please.
Congratulations. When you had just been appointed dean of the school, there's a celebration at the president's house at the University of Florida.
Yeah.
And all
Oh,
the
yeah.
deans, all the faculty was coming through congratulating the deans. And there were 3 other deans who were men.
Men.
And their
And me.
wives. And there was Betty and me. And you want to tell them what happened?
Oh, well, you're going to cut this out, some stuff out, right? No, but I'll go back to the original story.
Well, when the faculty came through.
Oh,
They
yeah.
congratulated the men dean and the little women.
Yeah. I was the first woman dean at the University of Florida. And we had to stand in line, you know, to be introduced. And the men came by and Joel was standing with me. They thought Joel was the dean. And so he said, "She's the dean." Being the first academic dean in a university that was huge, you know, gave me a little panache, but they all thought he was the dean. And then they had a statement in the paper. They said, they mentioned the new deans, and Dean Betty Siegel, looking more like a model than a dean, dressed in a red suit and a white blouse. And I thought, my gosh, would they ever say that about a man dressed in a, you know, blue suit with a new red tie? That just killed me. But then I started playing it out. So what?
Well, it's a little question that because the men were all coming by and the other deans.
And they'd shake hands with Joel thinking he was a dean.
And they asked her to ask me, said, "Congratulations, Dean Siegel, talking to me. Is this the little woman?" To which you replied,
I'm the dean. He's the little man. Little upstart there, you know. Where did I get that? I don't know. But wonderful years.
yeah. And she was also the first woman in the college in her department. And the men had you want to tell that story?
Oh, Joel. I was the only woman in the department of about 35 men. And this was the first woman, you know. And a friend of mine, we had finally got another woman. And the men always had this big gathering, you know, every year, party. And so here we had 2 women in the department. We borrowed Joel's clothes.
You weren't invited to it.
We weren't invited to the party. It's a party of our department. You know, I was in the department. Hannah Laurie was in the department. We took Joel's clothes. We put on his coats. And we walked into the party uninvited, painted mustaches, holding cigars. And the men had a fit. They said, "Good Lord." We were, "Hello, guys. How's it going?" You know? And Joe was just snortling. He thought that was the funniest thing. He put us up to that. But I love the idea. The guys never got over that. Ever. "Hey, how about a smoke? Y'all feel..." But Hannah Laurie and I, we became famous for that, as you can imagine.
The message was delivered.
Joel put us up to it.
That was the movie Victor Victoria.
You put us up to it, Joel. You were smart. But they never learned, but they learned, you know, that we put people in boxes. You know, this is our woman dean, or this is our, whatever it is. It's a good lesson, isn't it, that the individuality has to come out. We showed them. We wouldn't have done it with, but again, encouragement. I think that's really important, that you thought it was a funny, good thing to do. We wouldn't have done it by ourselves, but you were just chortling because you thought it was a good lesson for all of us to learn, you know? And it was. They never have gotten over that story at the University of Florida.
Hannah Laurie never returned my suit.
That's true.
Still needs it, right?
Yeah. But women's ways of leading and men's ways of leading are not that different. They used to be. But my own personal guru is Stephen Covey. I just love his work. And I don't think it's masculine or feminine, it's human. Humanistic, you know? I think we're becoming much more generic, I think, in leadership today than we've ever been before. It's not how to, but again, why to.
I think in some sense, the example of successful women over the last few generations probably allow men to be a little bit more themselves, maybe. I think, you know, it allows men, the role model of women leaders allow men to be genuinely themselves
Sure.
in leadership positions, as opposed to being something that may be
Exactly.
structured or...
Well, it's. I don't think it's a masculine or feminine thing. I think much of it is taught, and you know. But my own, as I mentioned, my own personal role model is Frances Hesselman of the Drucker Foundation. Here she leads a great Drucker Foundation, but she's my role model of extraordinary leadership, who happens to be a woman.
And she sounds your favorite thing, that leadership emanates from character, from who you are.
Sure, who you are. But I love the questions of The Rock. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? We need to be doing more of that. You know, how do I manage is the least important to me. It's the authenticity of the leader that comes out in how you enroll others in your vision. Those terms are not polite terms, those are important terms. And it's facilitative. It's inviting. We use the term invite, to summon cordially, not to make you do something, but to invite you to do something. These are all important changes of the lens, isn't it? Very important. To enroll others, to invite others, much better than to make you do something. And I think that's very democratic. That's a democratic theory of practice. It fits with them, democracy, doesn't it? Much more than how to, or I'll make you do that. Okay.
So I think all goes back to the fourth grade in this house.
Well, thank you very much. Any parting comments that you just got to get out into the...
I like the words of Nikos Kazantzakis. I struggle to signal my companions, to say in time a word, a password. Let us unite. Let us hold each other tightly. Let us give human meaning to the superhuman struggle. Aren't those good words?
Great words.
Not mine, they're his. But it is a struggle. A struggle we must.
And we will.
And we will.